From the towering Wasatch Mountains of the American Southwest, we welcome you to this episode of Undiscovered Utah. This show focuses on the mysteries that surround the rugged, difficult, and sometimes deadly American Southwest. I'm your host, JB, and tonight we're going to share with you the story of the ghost town of Forest City, the town of Mountainville, a lost Native American silver mine, a beautiful living cave system you can tour, and a hike that will test your endurance and your lungs, and the magnificent mountain they all have in common. So grab a drink and let's get started. Let me tell you something. As generations pass away, stories can be lost in time unless they are written down. I am so glad that the stories I'm going to share with you tonight were once written down because they are a great reminder of our Utah history. As a matter of fact, not too many people have heard of the town of Mountainville. Mountainville was first settled by a man by the name of Williams Wordsworth and a few other families in 1851. As the small community grew, it was decided that they would change the name of Mountainville to, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So the story goes that near the town site of Mountainville, there was a big canyon with a nice large river. Settlers soon observed that Native Americans would enter the canyon in the late afternoon, and then the next morning they'd be seen coming out of the canyon heavy laden with rich silver ore. But the townsfolk of Mountainville needed to be more concerned about establishing their farms and raising livestock to be able to survive through the next tough Utah winter. Crops needed to be tended to, and overall there was just too much work to be too concerned about the Native Americans and their trips into the nearby canyon. In 1877, the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, President Brigham Young, passed away. If you've listened to some of our other episodes, then you know that Brigham Young was adamant about the saints being laser focused on building up their farms and other life-sustaining enterprises and avoid being concerned with precious metals that were obviously very abundant in the area. But by 1877, many of the saints had been in the area for 20 to 30 years, and a lot of the farms were running like well-oiled machines. So it is not terribly surprising that some of the saints were starting to take more and more interest in the amount of silver coming out of the canyon by the hands of the Native American miners. Some of the men from town decided to follow the Native Americans into the canyon and see where they went. Then all they would have to do is stake a claim, and they would legally obtain the area rich in silver. As with all things in life, if you think it's worth having, then it's worth working for. And the Native Americans did all the work to get the silver. The men that thought they could pull a fast one were dead wrong. They were never able to follow the Native Americans to the source of the silver. Then years later, a man by the name of Hall was talking to an old Native American friend of his. The old Native American shared the only clue we know about the location of the rich silver ore deposit. He told Hall that, quote, "You will find it if a big fire comes or a flood washes out the canyon." Unquote. That's it. That is all that was shared. Oh, silly me. I forgot to tell you what the name of the town of Mountainville was changed to. Let's see if you can guess. I'll give you a few clues. Okay, first clue. The Wasatch Fault runs right through the middle of the town. Got it? Oh, not yet? Here's another clue. The Mountainville Academy is a public charter school in this town today. There's also a street called Mountainville Drive. Okay, last hint. The townsfolk said that the surrounding mountains reminded them of the Swiss Alps. If you said Midway, Utah, you're wrong. The answer is Alpine, Utah, and the canyon nearby is the American Fork Canyon. To my knowledge, the rich silver deposit that only the Native Americans knew the location of was never located by anyone else, and most likely the knowledge was lost to time. Even though the Native American silver location was never found, there were other silver deposits discovered in American Fork Canyon. Soon, people were staking claims high up in the canyon. Claims like the Sunbeam, Dutchman, Live Yankee, and Miller's Hill were the first to be staked. American Fork Canyon was becoming a very busy place. It didn't take long for a mining company by the name of the Conqueror to move in and buy out many of the claims. The Conqueror Mining Company took ownership of the Forest, Queen of Sheba, and Pilot mines, and they were doing very well. In the year 1872, the Miller's Hill mine sold for $120,000. The new owners wanted to attract miners, so they brought in some of the best chefs they could find. And they also built a really nice boarding house. It was said to be the best boarding house in the entire West. Then a very wealthy man from back in New York by the name of William Vanderbilt spent $400,000 to build a railroad in American Fork Canyon. This railroad was 23 miles long. The rail line was completed in 1872. Near the far end of the track, a mining camp started to be established, very close to the mouth of Mary Ellen Gulch. This soon became the proper mining town with saloons, stores, sawmills, and so on. The town was named Forest City, and the mines around Forest City were big producers. It is said that the mines essayed at between 20 and 30 ounces of silver per ton, but also contained gold, lead, zinc, and iron. It was so busy at Forest City that 40 teams of horses were kept hard at work hauling ore every day. As with most mining towns, Forest City's boom days were soon to come to an end as the mines started to run out of ore. Operations moved higher up in the canyon into an area called Mineral Basin. Today, there is absolutely nothing left of Forest City or the railroad. You can find a few foundations at Mineral Basin, but the ski resorts have moved in and purchased much of this area and have installed chairlifts where the old foundations once stood. You can still see tailing piles scattered throughout the pine trees, and if you adventure off the beaten path, you can find old miners' cabins that are still standing and should stay that way. Graveyard Flats is still home to about 40 miners that perished in those rough mountains. American Fork Canyon is more busy now than ever before. not because of mining, but because of recreation. People from all over the world come to visit the famous Timpanogos Cave National Monument. This multi-cave system was found by the Hanson boys that were tracking a cougar and followed it into the cave system. What in the hell were they thinking? The cave is located high above the canyon floor on the north end of Mount Timpanogos. To visit the cave, you will need to purchase a ticket. On this ticket, it will have the time you need to be at the visitor center located in the bottom of the canyon. Then you start your 1,092-foot climb up a steep trail. There are benches so you can stop and rest, and even a tunnel or two that you get to pass through. Once you reach the entrance of the cave, you will meet a tour guide that will escort you through the cave. The cave is a living cave. What that means is that it is still growing and changing. It is an amazingly beautiful place to visit. Inside the cave, it is always a cool 45 degrees. So plan on that. The real treat inside the cave is the heart of Timpanogos. We'll come back to that later in the episode. If you live in Utah or are just visiting and have never visited the Timpanogos Cave National Monument, you need to add it to your list. Just don't wait too long. It's a steep hike and you're not getting any younger. Temple Fork Reservoir has become a very popular area to lay on the beach and soak up some rays, or drop a line in the lake and see if you can catch some dinner. Take along a paddleboard, kayak, or a raft for some relaxing time on the water. If Temple Fork is a little too crowded for your liking, continue higher up the canyon to Silver Lake Flats Reservoir. Less people travel to this body of water as the road is not paved, and it can get a little rough at times. But don't get me wrong, it can still get very crowded on a hot summer's weekend. You can see lots of wildlife in the canyon. Deer, moose, bighorn sheep, and mountain goats are some of the most common, but there are also many bears and cougars. They just don't enjoy humans as much, unless, you have food. Rock climbing, mountain biking, hiking, horseback riding, off-roading, camping, and just plain old sightseeing are some of the activities you can enjoy in this beautiful area. Driving the Alpine Loop is a favorite activity for thousands each year. The winding road goes from American Fork Canyon up and over the mountain into Provo Canyon and lets you see the beautiful forest of Mount Timpanogos. Don't forget to stop in and see the amazingly unique Cascade Springs. Cascade Springs features luscious springs cascading through limestone terraces and sparkling pools. There are two pathways that stem from the parking area. One path is relatively steep while the other offers an easier slope and incline. The paved and wooded paths allow visitors to explore the beautiful waterfalls and ponds. There are 3 15-minute loops that surround the spring's major flow areas. If you are interested in seeing the entire area, allow approximately 45 minutes to complete it. The larger ponds are shallow and clear, which make it easy to see the native cutthroat trout swimming in the reeds. The site has barrier-free access and interpretive information. To get to Cascade Springs, take the Alpine Loop up American Fork Canyon. From the summit of the loop, you will come to a turnoff that will have a sign that says Cascade Springs, and at that intersection, take the road headed east. Another favorite activity is to hike to the very tip top of Mount Timpanogos. Every person should try to conquer this massive and iconic mountain at least once in their life, preferably when you're a little younger. There are two trails you can take to reach Emerald Lake. One trail starts at Aspen Grove Trailhead. That is closer to the Sundance Ski Resort. The other option is the Timpanuki Trailhead on the American Fork Canyon side of the mountain. This steep hike will lead you to an elevation of 11,749 feet, making it the second highest mountain in the Wasatch Mountains. This is a very popular hike, and the trailhead parking areas can get extremely crowded. It's important to only park in legal parking spaces, or your car will get ticketed and or towed. If everyone in your group is as fit as a fiddle, then you most likely can complete this hike in about 6 to 8 hours. If you're in more average shape, you should probably plan on more around 10 hours. You need to start your hike before daybreak, so bring flashlights and keep a sharp eye out for all kinds of wildlife. It is simply a gorgeous but tough hike. One of the treats you will see is the Timpanogos Glacier that empties into Emerald Lake. To wrap things up tonight, I want to share with you the legend of Timpanogos. In the early 1820s, a tradition was started of telling this legend around a campfire prior to starting the hike to the summit of Timpanogos. A long, long time ago, a tribe of Indians called Uintas lived by a beautiful silver lake. The lake abounded in fish, and when the Indians caught more fish than they could eat, they dried and stored them for future use. As time passed by, the tribe accumulated more fish than they really needed. Far to the north lived another tribe of Indians known as the Nez Perce. They were recognized as being great hunters, and like all other native tribes, believed in the Great Spirit. Once a year, the tribal leader climbed to the top of a very high mountain called the Great White Throne to pray to the Great Spirit. The leader of the Nez Perce had a son named Timpanak. Timpanak's mother died while giving birth, leaving the leader alone to raise his son. Since his early childhood, he accompanied his father each year on an annual climb to the summit of the throne. Timpanak soon became an expert climber. One year, there was no rain or snow, leaving many of the Nez Perce to die from famine. The leader was too ill to make the journey to the Great White Throne, so Timpanak went alone to pray to the Great Spirit. While praying, Timpanak was told to go far to the south, where a tribe would be glad to sell him food. He loaded a number of ponies with rich furs and then began his journey. After many days of travel, Timpanak came to the Silver Lake and found the Uintas. He was invited into the leader's teepee, and there he made his errand known. The leader treated Timpanak kindly and was willing to exchange dried fish for rich furs. Large skins divided the leader's teepee into 2 rooms. Through a hole in one of the hides, Timpanak saw a beautiful Indian maiden in the next room. She was Okanogos, the leader's daughter. Timpanak was ready to return home. He gave Okanogos a beaded headband that had been made by his mother. Okanogus, in return, gave him a pair of gloves she had made from deerskin. As his journey brought him to the crest of a distant hill, Timpenak looked back upon the dimming horizon to see a hand waving farewell. Soon the time came when Okanogus was old enough to marry. So that Timpenak might have an opportunity to win her hand, Okanogus asked her father to conduct a contest for all those braves who wished to marry her. With her father's consent, Okanogus sent a runner to Timpenak to come to Silver Lake when the pussy willows bloom and to bring 20 fat ponies. Word of the contest was also sent to other tribes. Okanogus went to the river every day and banked snow around the pussy willows so that they wouldn't bloom before Timpenak could arrive. When the time came and all the snow had melted, Okanogus would look to the north in search of Timpenak and his ponies. An Arapaho, a Shoshone, a Ute, and a Hopi brave came, each with 20 ponies required to participate in the contest. Timpenak was the last brave to arrive, but his ponies were so thin that all the other Indians laughed. Okanogus wanted to marry the Nez Perce brave and found faults with all the other contestants. The contestants were first asked to demonstrate their endurance by running around the Great Silver Lake. Halfway through the race, the Arapaho fell and accidentally drowned in the lake. The other braves thought Timpenak had pushed the Arapaho. Back at the leader's teepee, Timpenak was bound and placed in the teepee while the others decided what they should do with him. While waiting, Okanogus came to him and cut the cords which bound him. She told him to take the pony which she had waiting and pleaded with him to leave. He explained that to run would bring shame to himself, therefore he must stay. Timpenak then held his hands behind his back as though they were tied. With honor, he waited the decision of the leader. When the leader came into the teepee and announced that Timpenak was to be disqualified, Timpenak stepped forward and declared his love for the Indian maiden. The next day, the contestants were told to demonstrate their ability to support a wife by going out to hunt for food without any weapons. The Shoshone hunted long enough to get a rabbit. The Ute returned a short time later with a pheasant, and the Hopi came with a small deer. Timpenak had been gone for 3 days and killed a buffalo so large he couldn't carry it. Men from the tribe were sent to bring it back. The buffalo was large enough to feed the entire tribe. The final contest was to climb to the top of a high mountain where Okanogus would be waiting. The first to reach her could claim her as his bride. Okanogus was confident that Timpenak's great climbing skills would bring him to her first. The race was to begin with the rising of the moon, but Shoshone and Ute started sooner. When Timpenak reached the steepest place on the mountain, his opponents were waiting for him. Wrestling him to the ground, they pushed Timpenak over the ledge, where he fell hundreds of feet to his death. As Okanogus saw what had just happened, she wept great tears and vowed that they would never stop falling. The wall of tears still flows in Provo Canyon, now named Bridalveil Falls. She then threw herself off the mountain, praying to the Great Spirit to take her soul and join it with Timpanak's in the great beyond. Hearing her plea, the Great Spirit joined their two hearts together as one, forever to hang in the heart of the Timpanogos cave, buried deep within the mountain. The Great Spirit was so saddened by these events, he decided to put the Indian maiden to rest on the top of the mountain for eternity. Many now call her the Sleeping Princess. Those who travel through Heber Valley or Provo Canyon can clearly see her features. The name Timpanogos was given to the mountain by combining the names of the ill-fated lovers, Timpanak and Okonogas. The word Timpanogos has since been used by the Ute tribe to mean top of the mountain. Well, that's it for tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like more information about this episode or have suggestions for future episodes, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at info@undiscoveredutah.com. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and be sure to follow us. Just search for Undiscovered Utah. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Utah. Join me next week as we share more about the Great Southwest. Good night, everybody.